Hopefully we move someone without touching them.
I think people need to do things that scare the shit out of them.
That's what it's all about.
Becoming Player One is a reservoir of stories and experience. It's a promise to show up for ourselves so that we can show up for others. Hey everybody, welcome back to Philosophy Friday here on Becoming Player One. I'm changing it up a little bit. I'm currently reading a book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. I have not read Jonathan Haidt before, but he apparently wrote a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, which has kind of been on my radar. It's just, one of the books you see when you walk around the bookstore, and then you just one day pull the trigger on them. Well, I had been looking at that book, still haven't bought it, still haven't read it, but this one really stood out to me, and I'm reading it, and it's crazy, and I'm making this video to kind of help myself. This is really serious shit. And every morning I wake up now afraid of breaking news. Like, I don't... Okay, what was I saying? This book is a lot about what my podcast is about, and what my podcast is about is what I'm about, what my story is about, where I come from, and how I, for 32 years, have been interacting with planet Earth and the way it's been changing. I was born in New Jersey in the United States. I only knew one way of life for the first 2 decades of my life. I knew what I was taught. We all know what we were taught. And things are drastically changing. And like Bo Burnham says, I just want to leave the place better than I found it. So Jonathan describes, he describes it as, it's right here, the great rewiring of childhood. Like, being born in 1992, that generation, my generation, just barely missed the largest uncontrolled experiment humanity has ever performed on its own children. So, if I do anything with my talents and my gifts in this life, I'm learning, I think, by creating this podcast, by pursuing my own career goals, and by reading books like this to try to unfuck myself, is to help those who came after me, because I am only on chapter 2 right now, but oh my god, there's bits on RuneScape and World of Warcraft. Like, I'm telling you. Oh my god, this book is gonna fuck me up. So anyway, the purpose of this video, real quick, I was gonna do like a little Philosophy Friday, The Anxious Generation. Maybe you'll like to read this too. Let's just take a look at some of the, the recap bullet points at the end of chapter 1. That's what this video was inspired by. And now I'm kind of crying. Okay, in summation, between 2010 and 2015, the social lives of American teens moved largely onto smartphones with continuous access to social media, online video games, and other internet-based activities. This great rewiring of childhood, I argue, is the single largest reason for the tidal wave of adolescent mental illness that began in the early 2010s. The first generation of Americans who went through puberty with smartphones and the entire internet in their hands became more anxious, depressed, self-harming, and suicidal. We now call that generation Gen Z, in contrast to the millennial generation, which had largely finished puberty when the great rewiring began in 2010. That's not to say it didn't fuck me up, it's just different, and it gives me and my generation a different perspective, different strengths and weaknesses, and it's just all so crazy. The tidal wave of anxiety, depression, and self-harm hit girls harder than boys, and it hit preteen girls hardest of all. The mental health crisis also hit boys. Their rates of depression and anxiety have also increased a lot, although usually not by as much as for girls. Suicide rates in the United States began rising around 2008 for adolescent boys and girls. They rose much higher in the 2010s. The increase in suffering was not limited to the United States. The same pattern is seen at roughly the same time among teens in the UK, Canada, and other major Anglosphere countries, and also in the 5 Nordic nations. Feelings of alienation in school rose after 2012 across the Western world. No other theory has been able to explain why rates of anxiety and depression surged among adolescents in so many countries and at the same time in the same way. Other factors, of course, contribute to poor mental health, but the unprecedented rise between 2010 and 2015 cannot be explained away by the global financial crisis, nor by any set of events that happened in the United States or in any other particular country. How exactly does a phone-based childhood interfere with child development and produce or exacerbate mental illness? To answer that question, we must first consider what childhood is and what children need to do in order to develop into healthy adults. See, somewhere in there, World of Warcraft derailed me. That is my goal in part 2. I'll tell the backstory to the Great Rewiring, which is the gradual loss beginning in the 1980s of the play-based childhood. Thank you for watching. Go outside.